Welcome to today's video. Today's video is a three-part lecture series. The topic of this lecture series is challenges in implementing enterprise system. Part 1 going to cover the agenda for all three parts as well as the first challenge involved. The third and the final part will cover the third challenge and the conclusion of the series. Please do watch all three parts in this lecture series to understand the key challenges that I have discussed with implementing enterprise systems in big and mid-sized organizations. Also, I have discussed through case studies how we can overcome or avoid these challenges. Today's lecture on overcoming challenges in implementing enterprise systems. My objective for today is to share some real-life examples of implementation of enterprise systems, and through those examples have some discussion around the challenges that are faced in implementing enterprise systems. A little bit about myself. I have 22 years of experience. I have worked in different countries alongside people with different backgrounds and cultures. And having worked with people of different backgrounds and cultures, I've realized one thing, that everyone has their own working style, their unique styles. And when you are working in a different culture, you got to respect their culture and their working styles, and that's the only way you will be able to get support from the people and will be able to implement projects successfully in an environment which is different from yours. So my experience spans across various technologies, and I worked in supply chain as well as in analytics. I did start my career in software development, so I had this advantage throughout my career that I had the technology background while working on different technology projects. But having a background in technology development has its own advantages, but can have its some limitations as well. And we'll see that during our case studies further down in the lecture. My education includes bachelor's in engineering from Delhi College of Engineering, and I have an MBA from Arizona State University as well as a postgraduate diploma from IIIT Bangalore. I'm a proud father of two boys. This picture is of my boys in National Museum. They are 11 and 6. So today's agenda include discussion around three key challenges that are usually seen in enterprise system implementation. The first challenge is we'll discuss about is going to be around processes. How organizations usually get the processes wrong when they are implementing enterprise systems. I have selected two case studies from my experience. The first one is about what you experience when you don't think about processes during implementation, what kind of challenges you face. And the second one is going to be about what can you do as a project manager when you are implementing an enterprise system to avoid those challenges. The second case study is going to be around data migration and data cleanup. And the projects that think of data migration and data cleanup only as an afterthought and don't plan for it in advance, they face challenges. And I have a case study around that that showcases that. The challenge number 3 is going to be around the challenge that organizations usually face in selecting an enterprise system. And there can be two approaches to it, an unstructured approach and a structured approach. So which approach to choose and when, that's where we are going to look at in our case studies. First challenge is challenge around marrying organizational processes with enterprise systems. First case study around challenges with processes. This is about an international NGO and a subsidiary of that international NGO which implemented the ERP system for its Indian operations. So when I joined this NGO in their Indian subsidiary, they had already successfully implemented the ERP system. I joined their procurement department, and my boss, who was the head of the procurement, wanted me to look at the challenges that they were facing, process-wise challenges that they were facing, and to make some recommendations. I didn't stay there for too long to fix anything, but I stayed long enough to understand the pain points very well, and that's what I'm going to share today. So let's look at the invoice approval process that this NGO was following for its India operations. That invoice is first received by the procurement department, and then that procurement department would send that invoice to the project or to the department that had requisitioned the service or the good. The department would verify whether the received quantity and quality of the product matches the invoice or not, and then they will send it back to the procurement department. Procurement department would do further diligence and then send it to the accounting department. And accounting department, once it sees all the approvals are in place, everything is good, approve the invoice for payment. But in case there is an issue with the invoice, whether the accounting code doesn't match what it should be, or there is a discrepancy in the PO number or anything, they will circulate it back to the procurement department, and then it would go back to the requisitioning department if required. So if you notice, this process is very sequential. And it is a physical file that travels from procurement department to the requisitioning department, back to the procurement department, then to the accounting department, and if required, back and forth. So obviously, in today's world, this seems to be like a very slow and inefficient process, and it was an inefficient process. And this was the process they had before the ERP system, and this was the process they had after the ERP system. They made no changes to the process whatsoever during the implementation of the ERP system. ERP system in today's age, they follow a three-way match process, and this process is pretty much automated in most ERP systems that I know of. The three-way match, in case you don't know what the process looks like, is basically when the invoice is entered into the system automatically matches this invoice against the purchase order and against the good receipt note, and this three-way match between purchase order, good receipt, and invoice, if everything matches within a certain tolerance level, the invoice is automatically approved for approval without any manual intervention. In few invoices where there is a discrepancy beyond the tolerance level defined in the system, that is when the manual intervention would be required. Even then, those discrepancies could just be resolved by accounting department calling up the procurement department, or accounting department directly calling the requisitioning department to understand if an override is needed in this system. But this NGO didn't take the pain to change their processes and adopt the ERP process. So they continued with their process, and the result was that they now had to manage this Stone Age manual process of moving the physical file, and as well as they had to update this data in the system, because ultimately the system now drove the payment of invoices. So the workload increased, and they had no gain from implementing the ERP system, at least on the procurement side. So as I said, I wasn't long enough in the organization to fix things, but I did a post-mortem of the pain points they had in the procurement department in paying invoices. And what I found was that the implementation team didn't do any preparation to make any process modification. So in this case, I think the real reason was that nobody knew what the processes were in the ERP systems, and nobody even made an effort to understand those processes. And that was the real reason, I think, that they missed out. They didn't have the right team members who could do that. Let's look at another case study. This case study is about a hospital in California where I was HOD of procurement department, the hospital was looking to implement a new procure to pay system. The accounting department had already got part of that system, and they wanted to upgrade the procurement system in order for the process to flow seamlessly from creating the PO to making the payment on the invoice coming against that PO. I already had the experience of implementing ERP systems and such systems in past. I had the understanding of how three-way matching processes worked. I anticipated making changes to my processes, and we did so. So before we went live, we did a lot of preparation for the system implementation. As I was saying, that I was already aware of our current processes as well as the processes in the ERP system. I had anticipated the changes. So our then processes were a little bit manual. We did move a physical copy of the good receipt note from the warehouse to the accounting department, and also we emailed copies of purchase order, or actually links to the purchase order saved on the shared drive. We knew that this would change with the ERP system implementation, so we documented the new process, and we circulated it around after approvals. We snaked with the warehouse department and the PO department as well as the accounting department to ensure that they knew what processor would change and how they would change. Even after implementation, we took certain steps that ensured that we had a seamless and successful implementation of the new processes and the system. The vendor who provided the system had a training plan on which all the relevant stakeholders were put on the training plan, and they were trained in a timely fashion. Then we also provided, when I say we, the vendor and myself and few team members, we were always there to provide constant support to people who were working with the systems. In case they had questions, we were helping them find the answers to those questions. And then finally, we fine-tuned certain configurations in the system as we matured and had more experience with the system to make our lives easier. For example, when we implemented, we didn't leverage all the features such as tolerance levels, etc. But as we got matured in the implementation and we learned of new features, we definitely made use of those features better. So let's look at the key takeaways from these two case studies. First one is that preparation is key to getting it right when it comes to enterprise solutions. As you saw that if you're not prepared to make your modifications in your processes during the planning phase, and you don't do it during the implementation phase, then post-implementation is going to be very, very painful. To get it right, to prepare right, you do need the right team members who are in the know of what strengths the ERP brings in terms of processes. You also need people who understand the current processes, and you need people who can bring them together and make it happen. Not everyone can do it, so you do need the right team members. That is the key. The other key is actually identifying key stakeholders. You cannot have everyone who is essential for success on your team, but you can definitely have everyone who is essential for your success on your team on your stakeholder list. That means that the right team members will involve these right stakeholders at the right time to get their knowledge and support in implementation.